All right, so let's talk about the M433. It is a great all-around assault rifle. I do need to put the caveat for all assault rifles, they're not very good long range because of the bloom. It just makes them pretty ineffective when you get to pretty extreme ranges, like if you're doing, a battle royale or something like that. But for the M433, it's really best like close to mid-range, so its main competition is really the TR7. TR7 does a little bit more damage, fires a little bit slower, but in terms of the M433's fire rate's pretty good, pretty solid, pretty decent muzzle velocity, especially if you can put that extended barrel on there. So you're really looking at 4 bullets to kill, like standard 5 and 6, etc., as you see across the top of the chart. But I do want to note a couple things about it. So let's dive into the firing range to get a feel for how this gun works. Up close, if we just aim kind of dead center of the body, we're going to knock somebody down, but you're going to see the gun pulls pretty wickedly upward and to the right. So we go to the guy that's mid-range. Let's head for this same. Like here, you can see it. It's going to pull really, really hard. And so, especially if you're shooting at further range, right? And then we go after the guy that's like way out there, right? It's like impossible to hit them with how hard this particular gun pulls. So you need to think about it in two layers. One, we want to think about some attachments to help mitigate some of that massive recoil upwards and to the right. And two, you need to think about how you're pulling the gun down to keep yourself on center with the particular target, right? So if we just pull down pretty hard to the left, right, we can mostly stay on target. It is going to get harder and harder and harder the further out we start shooting them. All right, now let's talk about the firing pattern for this gun. I have found the most success with this gun when I empty it in thirds. So you notice I've got 30 bullets down in the corner. So I'm aiming to run through about 10 bullets, which is usually enough to give me to drop a target that's kind of close to mid-range for most of where this gun is best at. So I generally can drop 3 targets before I'm going to need to reload. And so there's not really an audible cue, but you can see it's around that we knock down this mid-grade target, or the middle distance target, right? Right? Notice where it's around that amount that we can knock down a target. So when I talk about using this gun, I don't full auto it because again, look at the massive kick. Even when we try to mitigate that kick and hold it down, it's still jumping all over. So I strongly encourage you, think about emptying the gun into thirds, like do a third, reset, do a third, reset, do a third, reset. Right? That seems to be the best approach to firing the M433. So let's dive into some of the attachments and how they can help mitigate some of the recoil for this particular gun. All right, so let's take a quick look at the grips. So again, we start off with no grip whatsoever. You can see the recoil pattern is just wild. Then if you put just a slight reduction grip on there, you get maybe a few more shots right at the outset, but it doesn't seem like it helps a whole ton. Once you start getting up to the moderate grip, as usual, you get a pretty significant reduction in the recoil pattern, right? Definitely tightens it up, even the tightening up over time. Then we go into like, the moderate and significant and greatly. You see a pretty decent recoil reduction, definitely at the beginning and also throughout time in terms of how much the thing is going to kick back if you're doing just a full auto. Now that being said, you have to really consider the opening shots, especially when you're close up, the way assault is typically played. You're not really sniping and shooting super far distances. So I don't know if these upper two grips are really going to provide you as much bang for your buck. It's just getting kind of like a moderate level grip or a slightly less grip and just trying to work on the top firing sequence. All right, so let's talk about the barrels. Now, none of the barrels affect the recoil pattern, so let's take that off the table. What they really do is help accent certain things the gun already does well. So with the base barrel, we've got a hip fire of 40. If we go up to the short barrel, it jumps us 6 points in hip fire. I do want to draw your attention to the green laser, the 20-point green laser that jumps us all the way up to 62. What you're going to notice in this game is like a law of diminishing returns. The higher you boost an individual stat, the less and less result you're going to get out of that particular stat. So what I mean by that is going from 40 to 60 is going to be a pretty massive boost, but going from 60 to 70, you're not really going to see much of it. So let's go into the firing range with no attachments whatsoever. As long as like we're within 10 meters, right? It's not terrible as a hip fire. Once you got to this guy that's like 20 meters out, it's going to take a while. While you're hip firing an assault rifle as opposed to an SMG, that's beyond me. So when we talk about the barrel, we're going to get just a 6-point jump. So when we go into the firing range, we'll notice a little bit of difference, right? You're going to notice a bit of a difference. So I'd say it's definitely interesting to stick just a short barrel on if you need a little bit of hip fire boost. Now that being said, let's flip over and use the green laser instead of that particular barrel, and we'll do the same kind of thing for it. All right? That green laser is a lot better. Now, if we try to stack the two of these things on, we're only going to go from 62 up to 71, and this is where I mean the law of diminishing returns. We're not going to really notice much of a difference, but with those added additional points that we've stacked on top of it. So I'd say when we get to the hipfire build, I'll show you a couple of ways you can think about your hipfire build to address that. Now, additionally, we've got the blue laser, and when that is equipped, it's really helping you with that aim down sight's accuracy while moving. And when you're shooting at targets that are a reasonable distance, so like 30, 50-ish meters, once you get kind of beyond that, the inherent bloom of the gun comes into play. So if you're moving and you're shooting and you're firing at a target way far away, it is really difficult to keep your aim on there, and the bullets are just kind of flying crazy. So it's much easier to just slow tap fire if you're firing at a distance. So the blue laser comes into play along with the the light barrel, when you're trying to shoot at targets at a reasonably close distance and you're going to be moving wild. Or you're running, you're just coming out of the run, whatever the case is, right? So you could think about adding both the light barrel and the blue laser to get a little bit of a bump, right? So we go from 52 to 56, so not a ton of an increase, but you'll see a pretty similar thing that's happening with the blue laser. And when we stack the two of them on top of each other, we go from 52 up to 60. So we're not going to see a massive increase compared to the amount of points we just poured into getting that enhanced accuracy while moving. So I just want to caution that. So in my testing, more often than not, I'm just going to use the extended barrel to get the little bit of bullet velocity that I need, or since I'm firing more often than not pretty close, we can stick with a basic barrel to help us save on points. So here we have the recoil pattern of the various muzzle attachments. So from the base recoil, and then we've got the compensated brake, the linear comp, then we move on to the different suppressors like the standard suppressor, the long suppressor, the light suppressor, for you to get a feel for how each one of them is going to help you deal with the recoil, because it's pretty strong. I would say the linear comp seems to make it worse. It kicks wicked hard. Granted, it's a little bit easier in terms of directionally. You'll hit more of your opening shots, which isn't a terrible thing to do if you're going to do some kind of burst auto. If you think about the way we talk about early in the video about how you burst this particular gun, it's not terrible to put that gun on. Just know that you're going to have to pull the mouse down just a little bit harder to get those opening shots to hit, but most of those opening shots are going to be a nice tight pattern. But I'd say you really can accomplish pretty similar things with all of the barrels. If you're going to go full auto for a long period of time, it seems like going up to the light suppressor or the double ported brake are a little bit better options for you. I keep saying double ported brake, but it's really the compensated brake. These seem to be a bit of a better option for you in terms of holding down the mouse button and just hoping you're going to hit all of the bullets without doing any of the burst firing that we talked about. So that being said, I think any of them are pretty viable if you're going to do especially the burst firing for it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the muzzle attachments combined with certain grips in terms of recoil control because of the kick of this gun. If you're going to use it in full auto, so there is its base recoil pattern. If we use the compensated brake and the strongest grip that's greatly or significantly, whatever it says, reduces our recoil pattern, that's what it looks like. Then if we just do the moderate reduction in recoil with that same brake, you can see it definitely helps us from, again, we're shooting from across the room, so we're engaging at a fair bit of a distance, so not right up close. And then if we do the linear comp is another way to go. You can see it's got a very tight recoil pattern, especially if you do the linear comp with the strongest grip available to us. That's what that pattern is. Then if we do the linear comp with just, the moderate grip. So it seems like the grip definitely helps as you get really deep into the clip. It certainly is going to help the most. But it seems like if you're just using no attachments whatsoever, those first few bullets, you better kill them in that first few shots because everything else is going to miss your target. Whereas at least if we put on some combination of the grip and some sort of a barrel, it seems like our opening shots are going to get much, much tighter for it. So if we do full auto, that's what the recoil pattern is going to look like. All right, so let's look a little bit deeper at using the fire pattern where we're draining about a third of the clip at a time. So if we do just no attachments whatsoever, that's what the fire pattern looks like. We do like 3 bursts to empty the entire magazine. And then if we go with the compensated brake, and then we add in kind of just a moderate grip, and then the compensated brake with the strongest grip available to us, then we do the linear comp with the moderate grip and the linear comp with the strongest grip. And then everybody's favorite, we do the lighten suppressor with the moderate grip and the lighten suppressor with the strongest grip. So when you think about how we compare the grips and the muzzles paired together, as long as you're using that like about a third of the clip or so of emptying and then resetting your barrel, and obviously we're pulling downward to the left to kind of mitigate some of that recoil pattern. It doesn't seem to matter which sets of attachments we have, as long as we have something on there, it's going to be better than the base recoil pattern. But it doesn't seem to give us a huge benefit to jump up to the strongest grip as long as we're using just that fire pattern that we noticed. So in other words, save your points. All right, let's get into a few different builds you can use on the M433. Now, again, remember, this gun is all about close range engagements. It is powerful up close and even up to a medium range. So you really want to think about how we accent that sort of play style that's very aggressive, very up close. So one way you can do it with kind of like a balanced build would be, let's get a suppressor that at least keeps us off the minimap. Because the hip fire is fairly strong, we're going to take a little bit of a hit to our hip fire by adding that. But if we put on just a basic green laser, it kind of mitigates that loss of hip fire accuracy. We put on a light barrel to give us a little bit of support for when we do aim down sights. Because you're up close, you are going to be dancing a little bit back and forth. And then you're obviously going to want some sort of fast magazine because you're going to be engaging multiple enemies. And then lastly, you want to think about what the grip is, which is probably the most important thing for this build because you need to mitigate those first recoil shots. Remember, we're going to be entering the clip like about a third of the clip at a time. So you can bounce around between either the rib vertical or jumping up to the canted stubby to again bring your aim down sights time even lower. So this would be like a pretty good balanced build you can think about. Another way you can go about building it is to, if you're going to be doing a lot more aiming and less hip firing, you may want additional support with the blue laser. You're going to get a little help with aim down sights accuracy while moving. And then jumping up to the OSA, it's got a little bit of a smaller frame around the player model that you're shooting at. So since you are going to be aiming, if you didn't like the iron sights, again, I went into just the basic 30 round magazine and the basic barrel, and then just a standard suppressor because I'll do a little bit of hip firing, but not a ton of hip firing. I'm going to be doing a lot more aim down sights and like up close and personal shooting for it. That'd be another way to do it. You could go kind of like more into the hip fire realm if you want to go that route and bring your hip fire up even more. Again, drop down to your basic sights, get the stronger green laser to get the really big boost in hip fire. Then obviously pick a CQB suppressor so you don't lose some of that hip fire support. And then obviously just picking some sort of a grip. The only grip that really matters for this particular gun, in my opinion, is like that ribbed vertical or a canted stubby to get that moderate reduction in recoil. And then because you're going to be up close and personal again, you definitely want that fast magazine. So that'd be kind of like a pure hip fire build. If you feel like you want to engage more at a moderate distance, I don't recommend it. I didn't have the best success for it, but I had okay success for it. I chose a brake, the compensated brake. You could also argue the linear comp, like either one would be reasonable in terms of helping reduce the amount of recoil you're getting, especially when you're shooting at medium range. The linear comp is going to pull a little bit stronger upwards, but it mitigates a little bit more of that left-right pull. So it depends on what your fancy is. If you don't mind a little bit of the left and right, and you don't have to pull down as hard on the mouse, go with the compensated brake. If you want to pull down a lot harder on the mouse, but get rid of some of the left and right, go with the linear comp. Those are kind of two different choices, up to you. Again, you need some sort of grip. You could even jump up to the H64. I didn't notice a ton of aim down sights accuracy penalty for it, but I don't know if it really helps me in terms of the amount of recoil, especially because we're going to be doing our burst firing. I didn't need the fast mag, so I went the standard mag here, and then I went with the blue laser because again I'm engaging a little bit further away, so I will be dancing a little bit left and right. So those are kind of like 4 different builds. Again, I would encourage you to think about where this gun excels and using the attachments to make the gun shine even better with that. So again, it's really making sure that you've got some sort of a grip on there, that fast magazine, accent a little bit of the hip fire, perhaps put on a simple suppressor to keep you off the minimap and engage everybody up close and personal with this particular gun. So there you have for the M433, one of the best up close assault rifles.